Okay, so the reading is from Happy Life, from Divaldo Pereira Franco by Joana de Angelis. Be wise, invest in your future. What is happening to you now is the result of a past that you can do nothing about it. But what is to come depends on what you do starting today. While you can reap the effects of the past actions, your present actions have future consequences. As you sow, so you shall repeat. You are destined for goodness. How to get there is your choice through quick or delayed actions and setbacks. Suffering is not inevitable, it is the result of a wrong choice. Invest in tomorrow and you'll be happy beginning today. And with that, I invite you all to close our eyes, take a deep breath. Let's connect ourselves with the energy and the spirituality here present today. Let's elevate our thoughts to our Master Jesus and ask Him to open our minds and our hearts for the teachings we are going to listen here today. So thank you, and so be it. So be it. Ciao.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all here today. My name is Thiago, and if you've been on TSS for some time, you may have noticed there are two Thiagos, and I will make a small joke saying just as Jesus had two apostles calling Thiago TSS as two Thiagos, and if you're a native English speaker, Thiago translates into James to English. Nobody believes that, but you can check. But anyway, without further ado, this is my premiere as a speaker at TSS. I'm very glad to be here. And I'm gonna bring some reflections about the evolution of our little round blue planet Earth. Sit like this. I don't know how to pass the slide, so. Okay, thank you. So imagine yourselves in a regular day in your lives, in a working day. You had a very busy day. Your boss gave you a hard time. Your coworkers were not very nice to you. They threw everything on you, and you're very happy that it's finally 5 p.m. and it's time to go home. And yes, you're going home because your days of work at home in the pandemic are over, and maybe that's the only thing you miss about the pandemic is that you could work from home. But it's not like that anymore. So, but it's finally time to go home. You go and you take your car, and you're gonna face the wonderful traffic of GTA. And you feel again that you're the only sole driver that should be having a license. But after all this struggle, you finally get home, and then you may make a decision that may not be very wise to check on the news, and then the news do not make you feel very good as well, because there is a lot of things going on in the world that you feel are not nice. We still struggle a lot with the challenges of climate change. We still are throwing, defects in the atmosphere. They're endangered species. We are destroying our ecosystems. There's still war going on in the world for several reasons, because of land, because of prejudice, because of religion, even. You see news about the urban violence, with the increasing rates of urban violence, and you may not feel as safe as before. And unfortunately, we still see people getting killed because they belong to a certain group of people. And when you see all of that going on in the world, you may think, are we really evolving where and when are we going to stop. You may even think that we're actually regressing. And any one of us may have thought about that during, one day in their lives, at least one time in their lifetime. So when we are asking ourselves this kind of question, I think it's a good idea to go back to this passage of Jesus that is reported in the Gospel of John, where Jesus says, "Let not your hearts be troubled." I think this first sentence is essentially saying, "Calm down, take a deep breath, let not your hearts be troubled." And then he goes on saying, "You believe in God, believe also in me." So it says, essentially, have faith. Have faith in God, have faith in me. And then he goes on saying, "There are many dwellings in my Father's house. If were not so, I would have told you. For I am going to prepare the place, and after I have gone and have prepared the place for you, I will return and will take you with me, so that where I am, you may be also." So I think for a long time, we interpret this as Jesus talking about heaven, as we thought that the Father's house is in heaven up above in the sky and up in the clouds, and there are many places there where the followers of Jesus would be, and Jesus would go and prepare the place for us. And whenever we are ready, he would come back and pick us up. However, this was said 2,000 years ago, and today we have a better understanding of what the Father's house is. So, if you think about it, the Father's house is the entire universe. Um, so, if you watched the lecture here about 2 weeks ago from our Big James, he was talking about some numbers about the size of the known universe. And I remember he said a number, say 1 septimillion, which is one followed by 24 zeros, which would be the distance that the light would run from one edge to the other, or something like that. Anyway, the Father's house is so big that we cannot comprehend the infinity of the Father's house. And the Father's house being the universe, when we look at the skies, if you're not in an urban area, you may have thought before, is there life elsewhere? Or does all this wonder, all this nature, all this creation out there was just created for us here on this round blue planet Earth? So when you think about it, you see that the Father's house not just in the sky up above that we can see with our eyes, but is the whole universe in which the Earth and all other planets and stars, comets are immersed. But before we talk about the other dwellings of the Father's house, I think it's important to understand our own dwelling, our planet Earth. So if we think about the people of the Earth today, our population, we can make a fair statement that we advanced intellectually uh, to a very to a very big standards, I would say. We have several advances in medicine, and here I'm a little bit biased because that's what I work with, but I can testify that there have been lots of advances in medicine. We can now treat diseases that we could not treat, and some of those diseases have become curable. Now we had advancing biological sciences, which provide us, for example, with the fast development of a COVID vaccine, which changed the course of the pandemic. This is all allowed by God for sure. The physics that allow us to understand the movement of the stars, or how the stars in the Father's house move, and from the simple things such as atoms. Chemistry, mathematics, and my God, technology has allowed us to talk to people who are very far away, several kilometers away on real time. I mean, a few years ago, that was totally unthinkable. And we can do that today. So there was a lot of advancement in our intellectual activity. However, our planet still has a lot of moral struggle. We have still a lot of pride, selfishness, greed, envy, and we suffer the consequences of these actions of our vices. And that's why we're still struggling with the climate change, wars, violence. That is, in the end of the day, it's all a result of our pride, selfishness, greed, and envy. If we're not so proud and so selfish, we would not be suffering as much. Putting all this in context, we can come to a conclusion that the Earth is not in the lowest degree of evolution. We have been worse, but we still have a lot to go through. And in the Gospel according to Spiritism, the spirits explain that those are the characteristics of a world of trials and expiations. And on the next couple of slides, we're going to talk about the classification of the worlds. As I said, Earth was once a very primitive world. We were cavemen several millions of years ago. And we first learned essentially how to walk, and then at some point we learned how to manage tools, and then we came to our current state, which is the Homo sapiens sapiens, which is estimated to have risen about 300,000 years ago. Uh, so at that phase of our human evolution, we were only worried about the very basic material things. Essentially, we were worried about surviving in a very difficult planet to live. We had to worry about our predators. We had to worry about hunting for food. We had to worry about protecting our offspring. So it was a very difficult world, but we evolved from this. And the spirits in the spirits book and also in the gospel, they say that even on that very early stage, we have already some awareness of something superior, uh, some awareness of God, something above us. And I was researching about this, and there is some debate among scientists if humans before the Homo sapiens they could organize a religion, if they would have some religious activity. The conclusion I came is that maybe they were not able to organize themselves as we are here today, like in a house, and then gather together to pray and study. But there is evidence that they would pay respect to their dead and like put flowers, ornaments, and so on, in a way to say like to wish them like a good passage to the other life. So we had some awareness of that. So even at that early stage, we have some awareness of God, which means that God does not leave us alone. Fortunately, we have evolved from that stage. And we can conclude from that that evolution does not occur in a lifetime, in a space of a generation. So remember, from going to the Australopithecus into the Homo sapiens sapiens, we took several of millions of years. And currently, if we look back, you may say that we were a little bit worse than we were today. So, for example, here in the Middle Ages, we used to burn people because they behaved somewhat differently from what was the standard, especially for the religious standard. So we have histories of women that were burned in fire and were killed that way because they were called witches just because they behaved somewhat differently. Um, we have a lot of Brazilians here, so remember, Brazilian slavery only ended 136 years ago, which, if you put in historical terms, is not so long ago. So all of this was considered normal at some time. It was normal to go and burn people in fire in public, and people would go and watch it. And that was kind of a entertainment for them, but also like a warning to keep the standard, the state of things at that time. We used to consider normal for people to be enslaved, not have their freedom, and have someone serve somebody else for life with mistreatment, with physical mistreatment. We do not consider that normal anymore. So some of our old ways are no longer accepted. So this is an evolution, but again, that took a couple of hundreds of years for us to understand and stop and, hey, something is wrong about this. We need to get better. But eventually we did. So we can conclude from this that the state of evolution of a planet essentially depends on the evolution of its inhabitants. And that's kind of clear. Our planet will get better, will be a better place to live as we evolve and as we get better. It depends on our actions. And I think that relates directly with the message that was read here today, that our actions will essentially, we're gonna plant, we're gonna sow, and we're gonna reap. So our harvest will depend on what we sow. And the spirits then will tell us about the general classification of the worlds. I think here it's important to understand that there are several levels of evolution of the worlds. It's not something written in stone. It doesn't mean that you can place every word in a box, but if you want to make a classification for us to understand a little bit better, then that's what the spirits propose to us. So the primitive worlds are dedicated to the first incarnations of the soul. So those are worlds that are essentially the stage of the caveman. It's the very infancy of the spiritual life. So it's a very material world. Uh, then we evolve going to the worlds of trials and expiations, which is the current state of planet Earth right now. It's a world where evil still dominates, and but we still what we have already achieved some degree of intellectual evolution. We're not in the stage of cavemen anymore. But it's a world where we suffer the consequences of our vices. We still struggle because often we still choose not we still choose the path of evil. We still do wrong things with guided by our selfishness and pride, and we suffer the consequences of that. So this is the type of the world that still live in, and that's why we still have so much suffering. But we're gonna go move forward this. We're gonna go at some point to the regenerative worlds. In those worlds, the evil still exists, but it has a lesser influence. I'm gonna talk about that in the next couple of slides as well. The happy worlds are worlds where good outweighs evil. So that those are worlds where the inhabitants are a little bit more, well, I'll say way more spiritualized. And finally, we will reach the divine world in which there's total predominance of good. And this is the home of the purified spirits. And that would be what we would consider to be the heaven in the classical way that we would think about it several years ago over the centuries. It would be the house of the angels as we would imagine them. So those would be the most purified spirits. It doesn't mean that they would have wings or anything, but totally spiritualized, totally away from the matter and experiencing complete joy of being close to God. So there is still a long way to go, but we're gonna get there. It just depends on us. So how do we get there? So we know that in Spiritism we have talked a lot about here in other lectures about the incarnation and reincarnation. And in the Spirit's book, Kardec will ask the spirits, what's the purpose of the incarnation of the spirits? Why do we incarnate? Why do we have to go to this material world and suffer everything that we suffer, everything that we go through? So the spirits, they reply that God imposes incarnation for the purpose of leading spirits to perfection. However, in order to reach this perfection, they must undergo all of the vicissitudes of corporeal existence. So here is essentially our test, it's our school. Everything that we go through life, every situation we are put in, this is a test for us. It's something that we can learn from. It's an opportunity for us to grow a little bit more in the moral way. So in question 133, Kardec makes a very intelligent question. Then he goes, what good does it for spirits to follow the path of morality if does not exempt them from the hardships of corporeal life? I mean, even if you follow the, as he says, the path of morality, even if you go through the path of good, you're still gonna have to go through the struggles of corporeal life. And why is that? And then the spirits very wisely reply, they reach the goal more quickly. So if you go through the path of good, you're gonna reach the goal of perfection more quickly, more rapidly. And then they continue, besides, the hardships of life are often consequences of a spirit's imperfections. This is not very hard to guess. So if you, for example, are addicted to smoking, for example, and if you smoke a lot throughout your life, you may have diseases as a consequence of that. You can have cancer, heart disease, and so on. So that hardship that you're going through is a result of something that you've done in the past. And this is just like a physical problem, but like the same applies for our moral issues as well, for our internal and emotional issues. That may be some consequence that has happened a few years before and sometimes in a prior lifetime. They continue saying, the more purified it becomes, the fewer torments it will suffer. Those who are not envious, jealous, greedy, or ambitious will not have to endure the torments that result from such defects. So, if on planet Earth we are still suffering the consequences of envy, greedy, jealousy, that is a reflect of the current state of the spirits inhabiting this planet. And if we evolve as a planet population and we get rid of all those vices at some point, as we will no longer have to suffer the consequences of it because we will have learned. Once you learn a lesson, once you learn something, that is for your entire life. Then on question 55, a little bit before those questions, Kardec asks, are all the globes spinning through the space inhabited? The spirit said yes, and contrary to what they believe, earthlings are far from being first in intelligence, goodness, and perfection. Now, I'm not going to go here and talk about life in other planets because that's something we cannot yet comprehend fully. But if you think about this answer, it's kind of logical if you think, because would God actually create the whole universe and all this activity that occurs around us just for the pleasure of the earthling's eyes? Like, are we the only creatures of creation? It doesn't make much sense. We are so imperfect that doesn't make sense that God would create all this perfection just for us and for that to be only for the entertainment of our eyes. Everything in the universe has a reason and a purpose, and reason will say that it cannot be only by this. So maybe we cannot yet comprehend, life in other planets, but I think we can think that in a logical way that this is not all only for us. And obviously, we are definitely far from being the first in intelligence. There are still a lot of things that we don't know. and you can learn something new every day. And as we may have already agreed, we are far from the perfect goodness and the ultimate perfection. And on question 185, Kardec asks, is the physical and the moral state of living beings on each globe virtually the same? And the spirits clarify that no, all worlds are subject to the law of progress. So every single planet, as every single spirit, and every single living being is subject to this law of progress. So eventually, everyone and every planet will progress. Uh, how fast we will progress depends essentially on us. They say that I'll begin like yours in an inferior state, and the earth itself will undergo a similar transformation. And they say it will become a terrestrial paradise when all humankind chooses good over evil. So essentially depends on our choices, on our collective choices as humankind. And I know that we cannot, answer for the whole humankind, but we can do our little part in our everyday actions. And I found it very interesting that the spirits use the term terrestrial paradise, because when we think about where we will go after we discarnate from this life, we used to think in a dual way. We could go, or maybe three destinations. We could go to hell if we were really bad, really evil. If you're not good enough, but also not as bad, you could spend some time in purgatory. But if you're like good, like if you reach the bar, you would go to the eternal bliss in heaven. So that's how we used to think things would happen after we discarnate. And this was reinforced by Christianity over several centuries. But we had that idea as well even before Christianity. So if you go back to the ancient Greeks, they had this idea of the Hades, which was the underworld, the world of death, and they had that space called the Elysium, where the heroes would go and spend their eternity. Uh, the Egyptians had a myth of a god that would weigh your heart in a balance, and if your heart was heavier than a feather, then you would go to what would be the hell of the Egyptians. So we had an idea that if you had good actions during your life, you would be found in a good place for your spirit after you discarnate. Although our ideas on how that would happen would not be as developed. So remember, Jesus said that there are many dwellings in the Father's house. And with Spiritism, we had several examples of how a spirit can be found in the spiritual life. And I invite you to take a quick read, if you can, in the book Heaven and Hell, which is the fourth book here. What is it? Here. It's the fourth book of the codification. So I brought some examples for you. So the first one is signed by a spirit that identifies as a Russian physician. So that spirit says, surrounding the planets, that is what you call space. That is where I am, but how many gradations there are in this immensity, men have no idea. I can glimpse the regions so resplendent with the divine fire that they dazzle me when I contemplate them through the veil still covering them. So this spirit was actually a more spiritualized and evolved spirit, and he was close to the happier worlds, and he was trying to communicate and to describe the feeling of being close to those worlds. But if you go further in his message, he actually has some difficulty in describing it because our words cannot describe that in perfectly. So it's a very high state of joy and happiness that the spirit experience for being in those worlds. Then we have the example of Eric Stanislas. He says, was far from being happy. Plunged into the vastness, the infinite, my suffering was so intense that I could hardly comprehend it. Blessed be God who allowed me to come to a sanctuary which the wicked cannot approach without impunity. So after this spirit's communication, if you go through, if you continue reading the heaven and hell, then there is a message from the guide, the spiritual guide of the medium who received the message, and he clarifies that the spirit of Eric Stanislas, he was suffering a lot from his past actions, but then he repented, and through a lot of study, uh, he was put back again in the path of good, and he was receiving as a mission to go to an inferior planet than his current state. And the reason that he was going to that inferior planet was to help the spirits on that planet to evolve. And this may happen. So if a world is evolving and a spirit is lagging behind, it may be that that spirit will be redirected to an inferior planet. So with the knowledge that that spirit already has, he can help the other inferior spirits to evolve, and that can come as a trial or an expiation for that spirit to make that spirit evolve faster as well. So that's what was going to happen with Eric Stanislas at the time. There is a message from the Marquis de Saint Paul. He says, I am in a transitory state. Human virtues are assigned their true value here, but I always aspire to what was truly good and truly beautiful. So my soul will not feel satisfied until it soars up to the feet of the Creator. So he was not on the happiest place in the spiritual world, but he was in a place where he was working a lot to improve himself, and that's what he expresses here. So I imagine that he was in some sort of colony, maybe something like Nosolar or maybe something like that, where he was studying a lot and preparing for his other lives in a way to improve, and as he says, go to the feet of the Creator. And he would not be satisfied until he reached that goal. And then there is this example from a spirit called Pascal Lavich. He says, if my spirit wandered around together with my body for so long, it was because I had to make expiation. So this spirit was actually very attached to his material life, and he had a violent death, and his body wasn't found for several months. So his spirit was experiencing the sensations that were being pressed on his body because he was having so much struggle to be detached. So those are examples on how we can find ourselves, in which dwellings we can find ourselves after we discarnate. And as we had concluded, even from first interpretations from that passage of Jesus, it all depends on how we're going to behave here, on our actions here, and that will reflect on our spiritual life as well. I should say, however, that we can always learn. The spirit does not stay stationary in the spiritual life. So through prayer and study, dedication, you can move from a not so good dwelling to a better one, and then continue to evolve. So where will we be going from here, from this world of trials and expiation? So the next step is for the earth to become a regenerative world. And how is that like? So the spirits describe that it's a world of transition between the worlds of expiation and the worlds of bliss. So it's halfway through, essentially. Though in those worlds, the repentant spirits they will find repose, peace, and purification. So the spirits describe that those spirits they do not have envy, greed, and selfishness. It doesn't predominate anymore in their mind, and they're essentially focused on improve themselves and aspire to God. That's what those spirits are mostly aimed to. However, it's not a perfect world still. the spirits on those planets, they're still subject to laws of matter. So there are still struggles that we have to go through that are related to our material world, our material aspect. So there are still some laws of matter that we have now to cope with, but it's definitely better than a world of trial and expiation. We still face trials, but no expiation. And what does that mean? The trials are for us to get better. So I choose to go through a situation under my choice and with the guidance of our spiritual friends. I choose to go through a specific trial to try to make myself better to improve. An expiation would be a consequence of some wrongdoing that I've done in a past life, and now I have to repair it. So mostly in those planets, the spirits will choose their trials to go through, but they do not suffer the consequences of expiation. It's not yet the perfect happiness, but it's the dawning of happiness. It's the beginning of happiness on our spiritual life. And just as the Australopithecus did not become the Homo sapiens sapiens in a lifetime, no, we're not gonna become a regenerative world in a lifetime. It's not gonna be, oh, today we are trials and expiations, and tomorrow we are a totally regenerative world. No, this will happen gradually, almost impersonally, and then someday, um, several years from now, maybe we're gonna go back and think of our human history and say, well, can you believe that we used to discriminate people based on their color, for example, or we used to kill other people because of this and that. And one day, maybe we won't be doing that anymore. And this will be just part of our history. So we think, is planet Earth really evolving? There's a lot of struggle still there. There's a lot of bad things happening. But I like to think that yes, we are evolving a bit slowly. So even though there is a lot of racism, for example, happening, there are many people out there talking against racism and saying that it is wrong, such as this is just an example of the Black Lives Matter movement. And obviously, it's not just Black Lives Matter, but all lives matter, obviously. But people were discriminated and killed because they have a different skin color. And we are realizing step by step that this doesn't make any sense. Uh, we had a lecture a couple weeks again today here about the gender of the spirits, and the different genders. And we learned that the spirit has no gender. We can reincarnate as a man, as a woman, depending on the trials that we have to go through. So it doesn't make sense to discriminate someone or tell that someone is wrong based on their gender, based their sexual preference, and so on. So we are finally realizing that. Remember, there were countries, there still is, where being from the LGBT community is considered a crime and sometimes with a death penalty. But we are slowly evolving away from that. Yes, there is war. There is war because of religion, because of land, because of creed. But at the same time, we are seeing a lot of people asking for ceasefires. We're seeing a lot of people asking for war to stop. And this is because we are realizing that it doesn't make sense for us to kill a fellow human being that we haven't even met, that we don't even know, because of because of richness, resources that we essentially cannot share. And even though we have a lot to learn about climate change, there are people becoming more aware of how to reasonably use our resources so we can have a better life on this planet. So we are still struggling, we're still learning, but I think we're moving on the right direction. And again, we're gonna be better faster, uh, as fast as we inherit all those teachings, inherit all what we're learning with our tasks. So the spirits say that on your world, our planet Earth, uh, you still need evil in order to sense the good. You still need the night to admire the light. You still need sickness to appreciate health. And how true that is. You don't appreciate sometimes how healthy you are, the ability to walk around, like myself today. I woke up, had my breakfast, a grand breakfast. I took the TTC. I came here doing that, with my legs walking, breathing. Sometimes you take that for granted until like you face some situation, some disease that takes you away from that, and it's like it's, and then that's when you start to appreciate your health. Right? Um, like we still need evil to sense the good. Like we kind of still need all those bad things happening to give value to the also the good things that are happening right now. So we still need those contrasts. And this is just a reflection of our current state of evolution. But one day, when we are evolved enough, those contrasts will not be necessary, as the Spirit says here. They say eternal light, eternal beauty, and eternal serenity of the soul provide an eternal joy that is disturbed neither by the anxieties of material life nor the contact with evil persons who have no access there. So I highlighted there the eternal serenity of the soul, and I wonder how that feels like. Like you are in a such state of bliss and complete faith in the Creator that whatever happens, you stay serene and you don't suffer anymore from, as they say, the anxieties of material life. There is no evil anymore. It's a state of total joy and bliss that we are far from reaching, but we are a little bit closer. Oops. Um, so when I was given this theme, actually the original title was "The Planet Earth as a Gift," and that was thinking about that. And I like to walk around the city, and those are photos from my personal file. And sometimes you get glimpses of nature, even around Toronto in the urban area. Uh, and I was wondering how beautiful the world is. Like even on a snow day, which we usually don't like as much, that it can be beautiful. Uh, my camera finally can get a decent photo of the moon, and just took that photo because I like to look at the moon, and I think how beautiful it is. And just a couple weeks ago, we were in total wonder with the eclipse that happened. So even though this is a world of trials and expiations, this planet is a gift. It gives us all the resources that we need to live. We just need to share it better amongst everyone. And it also is a gift just to be incarnated, just to be alive. We have to think of our incarnation as an opportunity to make ourselves better. We have to leave this incarnation a little bit better than we arrived. And obviously, we do not remember what was planned before we came in the spiritual world, and there are several reasons for that. But we have hints. We are put in situations, in specific situations. We are put in a place. You live in a certain city, work with certain people. You are dealing with those family members. None of this is by choice. Those are people that you have to live with and grow together with. And if you're facing some difficulty, no, it's not easy, but it's an opportunity for you to grow and learn from that. So being here is a gift, even though it may be difficult. It's always an opportunity. And what is the way to regeneration? We always have to go back to Jesus. The spirits clearly state that Jesus is our model and our guide, and we should follow his teachings in order to improve and to make our way to the regeneration and the worlds after that. So I summarize here. I think it's the main teaching of Jesus when he says, "You shall love Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind. That's the greatest and first commandment. And here's the second, which is similar to that one. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and prophets are contained in these two commandments. So if we follow that more closely, I think we would be suffering a little bit less. And even though we cannot change the whole world, we can make our own internal change, and that will certainly influence our environment around us. So I think with that, we'll finish for today. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thiago. Any questions, any comments?
There is a comment that I would like to make about the war situation. Like if you think in the Spiritist point of view, like even the idea of war doesn't make any sense, right? Because like in this reincarnation, you can be reincarnated as a Russian, but maybe in the past reincarnation you were reincarnated as Ukrainian, for example, right? Or even like a Chinese, an Indian, and a Pakistanese, and they're all in Kashmir, right? So like even if in this reincarnation you reincarnated on one side of the war, maybe in the previous reincarnation you reincarnated on the other side of the war. So even the idea of war in the Spiritist point of view doesn't really make sense, right? And not only war, any kind of discrimination generally. In this reincarnation it can be white, but in the past reincarnation it could be black or anything. So even like the ideas of discrimination or war, they don't really make sense if you believe in reincarnation and the Spiritist point of view. Right?
For sure, Eduardo.
For
Yeah,
sure.
it makes sense. We know that, unfortunately, those wars happens also for a reason. Am I right? As you mentioned, sometimes you may be on one side, the other on another side. You may be in one religion in one incarnation and another one in another one, because you have to pass through and learn through that. Am I right? And as Thiago mentioned, our motto and guide is always Jesus, and like what, where he was born, where everything he went through, all the goods he spread, that is our path, let's say, for the good, for sure. Yeah. Thank you very much, Thiago.
Thank you.
Amazing lecture. I think you touched all the points. I think you telling the news was amazing. You had that full day, very stressful, and then you get home, you turn on the TV, and say, oh God, even worse, But then you realize, as you mentioned, that although there is a lot going on, there's people fighting against that. What in the past we would not see.
Yeah.
Right?
That's true.
Okay. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for those who are watching us through the internet. We'll see you next Sunday again. Thank you.